Good morning, and welcome to All People's Church, Unitarian Universalist. My name is Marianne Clark, and I am your co-celebrant this morning. Our Sunday service is a shared time of worship for all present as we gather for music, spoken words, time of reflection and inspiration as a religious community. Let us come together in a spirit of compassion and respect for ourselves and others attending this service. We especially welcome those who are visiting today. If you haven't yet done so, please sign in at the visitors table by the front door, where you can be placed on our mailing list to receive weekly emails and the monthly newsletter. Before we continue on to worship, there are a lot of announcements. Tomorrow, the Spectrum Chamber Group will be playing here at 7:30 in the evening, and they're always wonderful. So please come and bring refreshments if you feel like it or if you can. Otherwise, you might give David a little bit of money. There will be a church workday next Saturday, October 28th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. outdoors, or perhaps indoors. See Joel Bailey for more details. He's right back there, waving his hand. Our service auction is Saturday, November 11th at 6 p.m. Dinner is barbecue. And dinner tickets and the quilt raffle tickets are available in the foyer, right outside there. And donation forms and turn in your donation forms in there, back there also. Talk to Dan Sexton. Dan, are you in here? I think he's outside. I think he's out there right now, but talk to him for more information. And this is from Rosalind Hunter. We have greeter training next Sunday, October 29th at 9:45 a.m. in the Jaggers Parlor over there. Please join if you would like to help the church greet our visitors and members on Sunday morning. And last, I think this is last but not least, there's a fundraiser for the Texas Boys Choir, in which the son of our wonderful piano player, Misha, sings. And you can sign up for that and pay later. They're selling poinsettias. The picture here, here's the sign-up page. They're $16 each. The sizes are 6.5 inches. I guess that's the width of the flower. And they have all three colors, red, white, and pink. So see Misha if you are interested in one of those. I think That's all of the announcements. Any other announcements? Okay. So, gracing our pulpit again this morning is our regular guest minister, Lori King Nelson. We're very happy to have you. And now, please settle comfortably for our musical prelude.
Thank you, Misha. It was beautiful. Before we call ourselves to worship, I have one more announcement. I noticed this morning in the news that Fort Worth was named one of the top 5 places to live in a zombie apocalypse. Who knew? So I don't know what that's going to do for the real estate values, but, you know. Let us call ourselves to worship with the words of Tanya Marquez. Our lives intersect and intertwine. Vines cross and intertwine themselves on a tree trunk. It is a wonder and mystery that our paths have crossed. That in the immensity of time, in the vastness of space, we coincide here. I am in awe at the ways in which our lives intersect and intertwine, at the beauty we create when we gather. May our coming together make us more compassionate, more just, more caring, and more loving. May our hearts and minds be open to this offering. I am so glad you're here. Let us worship, let us marvel at the miracle of being here right now, and the mystery that has brought us together.
We invite you now to rise in body or spirit for our chalice lighting, our opening hymn, in our spoken affirmation. Our chalice lighting words come to us from Adam's slate. We gather this morning as one community, a community united by common ideals, love, justice, diversity, freedom, mutual care, equity. Yet look around. Look at the faces of those around you. Each face represents an individual. Every one of us with our own story, needs, strengths, and faults. We light our chalice today honoring our common connection and also the uniqueness that lives within each of us. Please now join in singing our opening hymn, the hymn of the month for October, number 346, Come Sing a Song With Me. Please join me now in our common affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another.
May I have the young and young at heart come forward if they wish? I'm going to slip down this way. Yes. And it's good if you don't want to come forward. I'm okay with that. I'm just going to sit down here. I just want to read you something. I'm in. So today, I'm talking about how we care for one another and what that does for us and what it does for our community. So I'm going to read this story for you. Once upon a time, there was a young kid named Rohit. He came from an impoverished family. He was passing through the forest carrying some timber one day. He came to an elderly man who was starving. Rohit wanted to feed him, but he didn't have enough food for himself. As a result, he continued on his journey. On his journey, he came upon a thirsty deer. He wanted to give him some water, but he couldn't since he didn't have any. As a result, he continued on his journey. Then he came upon a man who wanted to set up his camp, but didn't have any wood. Rohit inquired about his condition and handed him some wood. He offered him some food and drink in exchange. He returned to the elderly man and fed him, as well as giving the deer some water. The deer and the elderly man were overjoyed. Rohit then cheerfully continued on his journey. Rohit, on the other hand, slid down the slope one day. He was in excruciating pain, but he couldn't move and no one could help him. However, when the elderly man he had previously assisted noticed him, he promptly approached and hauled him up the slope. His legs were riddled with wounds. When the deer whom Rohit had given water noticed his wounds, he dashed to the forest and returned with some plants. His wounds were covered after a while. They were all ecstatic that they were able to assist one another. So the moral of this story is supposed to be that if you help others, they will help you. I think that sometimes that can be real misleading for us because sometimes when we help others, they don't help us in return. And that's okay because that's not why we're helping them. The whole point of helping someone else is to create community and show love and compassion and caring for people around us. The rest works itself out in other people's lives. So, when you go and do good deeds, just know that you're doing them for just the general principle of doing good in the world, and not because somebody might have something to offer you in return.
Children out with hymn number 414 as we leave this friendly place. For For the gifts which we receive and the gifts which we ourselves can share, may we be truly grateful. May we be committed to using these gifts to make a difference in the world, to increase love and justice, to decrease hatred and oppression, to expand the beloved community, to share and to keep sharing. Your contributions will benefit the missions of our church, as well as an outreach to the larger community by sharing the undesignated cash offerings that are collected each week. We do this on a quarterly basis for a nonprofit or charitable organization. Our current Share the Plate recipient is Jane's Due Process. From their websites, the missions of Jane's Due Process is to help young people in Texas navigate parental consent laws and abortion bans to confidently access reproductive services. The offering will now be accepted. Will the ushers please come forward? Thank you, Misha. Please rise now as you are willing or able to sing our next hymn, which is number 18, What Wondrous Love Is This? In this time in our service, we pause to honor and to give time and attention to those things most important to us. We gather here for healing and for peace in our hearts and in the world, and honor our time together with shared stories and news from the congregation. Each week there's a journal outside the entrance, this one, where you can write a message of memory or hope. Also, at any time during our service, you are welcome to come forward and light a candle in our meditation center here at the side of the chancel. Today, from our book of Memory and Hope, we include two very happy stories. Eliza Thornton will be appearing in Theatre Arlington's performance of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Opening night is November 3rd. Please visit their website for tickets and use the code BANG BANG to get $5 off. And Jacob, stand up just so everybody knows who you are. After 6 months of hard work and late nights, Jacob Green took home the first place at the National Electrical Competition.
Woo!
He competed against 30 other apprentices from 20 different states and is the first Tarrant County winner in 10 years.
Amazing.
Yay for Jake. Let us also include in our circle of concern those beyond our immediate community. The following words are from the Reverend Eric Cherry at Westminster Unitarian Church in Rhode Island. We come together from unique places and situations. We come with doubts and disbelief as often as we come with certainty or expectation. We come with joy and hope in fullness and gratitude as often as we come with despair, sorrow, and hopelessness. In whatever spirit you arrive at this moment of sharing together and with the greater mystery that surrounds us all, let us be together, feeling our neighbor's love and compassion, extending the same to others, and receiving God's gift of acceptance for one and all. Please now settle comfortably and pause for a few moments of quiet meditation to uphold and uplift the sorrows and celebrations, both spoken and unspoken, among us. And then Misha will lift our hearts with music.
Thank you again for this. I want you to know that we were raised in a very musical household. My grandmother was a pianist, and my mother was a singer and sang with the Fort Worth Opera Chorus for a very long time. My mother wanted all of us to play an instrument, and so we took lessons. And unfortunately, my instrument of choice was an accordion. My mother really, really wanted me to play the accordion, and I kind of turned out more like Weird Al than anything else, so I gave that up a long time ago. But I appreciate your beautiful music and that it comes so deeply from your heart. Thank you. Our reading is from a parent. Her name is Chris Jones. For years, wave after wave of sorrow came crashing down, thrashing my soul. Sometimes it was hard to breathe, but I surrendered my mind and heart to the ebb and flow of the emotional tide. I'd find my way to shore. Sometimes I'd find others drowning in grief, and I'd tug them back to shore too. 10 years have passed. Every so often, the realization my son is gone hits me. It's not like I forget. I think about Mitch every day. But knowing something has happened and feeling its consequence are entirely different experiences. When that realization hits me, when it brings me to my knees, I do my best to surrender to all the feelings. Rumi taught, to cure pain is in the pain. I have experienced the wisdom of his words. Grief is so much more than being sad. I'm not even sure it's an emotion. I know it feels like it, but I sense it's much more than that. As far as I can tell, grief seems to be a spiritual and mental struggle to adjust to absence. We don't grieve for the things we have. We grieve for what we lost. Today, my heart grieves for Mitch. Yes, I've heard it all before. Do not cry, I'm in the other room. Or, life is but a blink in the eternal scheme. Those platitudes are hardly useful to those who grieve. The last time I checked, life is the longest thing I know in mortality. If you want to help those who hurt, don't talk to them about blinks and eternalness. Instead, honor their suffering by mourning with those who mourn in the present moment. Hold space for their brokenness as they squint through tears to find their broken pieces and put themselves back together again. The battle of grief is difficult enough, and is made more complicated when those close to us don't honor the pain that is present. Recognize the sacredness of suffering, and you may discover something special about your loved ones and about yourself. So the headline read, 12 signs your Christian beliefs are more toxic than holy. Number 4 is a lack of empathy. Number 6, exclusivity. Number 7, proselytizing during crisis. Number 9, selective compassion. Number 11, it's fear-based. That tracks with the actual research and my life experience. According to Pew Research, only 11% of Christians feel comforted by their church during a grief crisis. A hefty 42% of Christians who have left the church did so because the church valued the message over the member. They were not being cared for during times of grief. I've heard ministers, upon learning of a death in a member's family, ask, were they saved? Grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. The Holmes-Race stress scale details 43 life events that are most likely to create feelings of grief. The problem with that list is that it's comparative, and it ranks various losses on a point system, even though, as Russell Friedman points out in his grief support blog, we experience our grief at 100%. That isn't to say that all grief is the same. It is saying that some griefs impact us more deeply and over longer periods of time than others. From personal experience, I can say I grieved deeply when my father died, and differently when I moved away from Japan. But they were both losses. An acquaintance, responding to my grief over the move, determined that I should smile because God has a plan for me in Texas. Still not sure what that is, but... A friend in the midst of a separation and facing a particularly difficult and ugly divorce shared that this change in her life prompted her to seek out counseling. When she told her therapist that she was afraid of what was ahead and grieving all that she had lost, it was suggested that they could pray together for her husband to return. I don't want him back, she said. I want the rest of the life I built. She was grieving the change in her finances, moving, the beautiful house she had made perfect, and she wasn't being heard. And not only was she not being heard, but it was being suggested that God could fix it. Now, many of us were conditioned to believe that we just had to pray for this and ask God for that, as if God was some kind of vending machine in the sky, apparently just like the ones on earth because they only work half the time, waiting for us to pop in a prayer and receive whatever we asked for, or not. Do you see it on Facebook? People asking for their prayer warriors to send up prayers that God can't ignore. Sometimes in a later post, we find out that those prayers didn't save someone. God needed another angel. Or the job fell through. Every time one door closes, another one opens. Or a marriage ends. God has something even better waiting for you. Sometimes people think they did work. As one family grieves the loss of their child, another is celebrating the healing of theirs. Both prayed. But then there's the platitude. I've heard it said that when we pray for something, sometimes the answer is no. What does that do to our faith? What does that do to our grief? And what does that do to our compassion and empathy for one another? Kate Bowler, in her book, Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved, chronicles her journey with cancer, the loss of a child, and the struggles of poverty, all while fully immersed in an evangelical church preaching a prosperity gospel mission. Even with all of her tragedy, she proclaimed she was living a blessed life, that God had a plan for her, that poverty was as temporary as her failing human body, that her struggles showed God she was worthy and faithful. She talks about how wonderful the congregation was at suffering together and how many phrases they could use to minimize grief and only credit God with the good things that happen. It took a very long time and a number of tragedies for her to begin shedding the damaging theological conditioning she had once embraced. And now she helps others to understand how harmful this theology is to our grieving and healing process. Kate says that when someone is experiencing tragedy and grief, if you can't say something helpful, you should just offer a hug and keep your mouth shut and move along. She has a short list of things you should absolutely never say to people experiencing terrible times. Well, at least it isn't, and then you insert anything here to create a useless comparison. In my long life, I've learned that there you provide a litany of words that offer zero comfort. It's going to get better, I promise. Really? Can you cure cancer? God needed an angel. And that is so not how that works. Read your Bible. Also, how sadistic is that? And everything happens for a reason. Kate says the only thing worse than saying this is pretending you know that reason. I've done some research and just don't ever say this to someone unless you have 27 PhDs in whatever their problem is. So I'm sure most of you know who UU minister Reverend Naomi King is. Her parents, Stephen and Tabitha King, recount the story of the loss of their daughter Naomi's cat. Let me read you an excerpt from an article written by Bev Vincent. In 1978, Stephen King was invited to be writer-in-residence at the English department of his alma mater, the University of Maine at Orono. He moved his family into a rented house on a major highway in Orrington. The heavy traffic included transports heading to and from a nearby chemical plant. A new neighbor warned the Kings to keep their pets and children away from this road, which had used up a lot of animals. In support of this claim, the Kings discovered a burial ground not far from the house with Pets Cemetery written on a sign in a childish hand. Among its residents, dogs, cats, birds, and a goat. Shortly after they moved in, Naomi's cat, Smucky, was found dead on the side of the road when they returned home from a trip to town. King's first impulse was to tell her that the cat had wandered away. Tabitha, however, believed this was an opportunity to teach a life lesson. They broke the news to their daughter and conducted a feline funeral, committing Schmucky's mortal remains to the pet cemetery. A few nights later, King discovered Naomi in the garage, jumping up and down on sheets of bubble wrap, indignant over the loss of her pet. "Let God have his own cat. I want my cat. I want my cat," she was repeating. Wow, where did that come from? An 8-year-old already trying to understand a cruel God. I wonder if anyone ever told Naomi that God needed another cat. Because doesn't that sound just as ridiculous and void of love as God needed another angel? It's just not possible to be present for someone, to be compassionate and empathetic during crisis and blame it on God. That isn't hearing someone's pain or their fear or their needs. So how do we be present for others when the God we were taught to trust has failed to be present for them? What was helpful for you in your grief? We can begin there. Sometimes there are no words, but we can sit together in silence. Just being a comforting presence offers greater solace to grieving individuals. The Stellenbosch Theological Journal published a study called A Practical Theology of Bereavement Care, Re-Ritualization Within a Paradigm of Comforting Presence. And bear with me while I read part of the abstract. The investigation examines the growing threat of de-ritualization, a public openness to revise, replace, minimize the significance of, or even eliminate or avoid long-held funerary rituals to assist in the adaptation of loss. The notion of re-ritualization is operationalized as an intentional act of restoring and re-engaging in creative and meaningful ritual forms that give symbolic expression to significant thoughts and feelings of the bereaved within a social ethos that is no longer committed to a conventional or fixed approach to ritualization. In order to facilitate a process of re-ritualization, bereavement care is linked to the notion of comforting presence. It goes on to say the investigation focuses on a concern for the marginalization of bereaved human beings in the context of cultural shifts now shaping 21st century pastoral care. So I'm not going to read the rest of the abstract because some of the words I can't even pronounce. It's just too technical. But what it's saying is, ministers are shifting from a theological grief care to a compassion-based grief care, being present and being a comforting presence. This is in response to the damaging impact of theology on grief. It's a lot of words to say, how about we just sit with them, listen to them, and not tell them everything happens for a reason, and by the way, God needed your cat. So we go back to that list of 43 life events that can produce feelings of grief and consider how we might approach them and be a comforting presence. A death in the family? Call them. And if you have no words to say, say that. I have no words. I am so sorry. Let me come sit with you. A divorce or separation? Let me bring lunch. Loss of a job, a pregnancy, an illness, any one or more of those life events that we have all struggled with. I'm so sorry. Let me come sit with you. Take them coffee. Take them dinner. Take them groceries. It doesn't matter what you show up with. Just show up. Their grief is non-negotiable. It's real. And whether we find it trivial or not, whether we have been through worse, if we want to show others what holy love is, let them experience it in the ways we care for them during times of crisis. Being a comforting presence for others is about as holy as it gets. I don't have 27 PhDs, but I know that that's what we are here for. And thanks be for that. Our closing hymn this morning is number 205, Amazing Grace.
Be seated. No, don't be seated. Never mind. Our chalice extinguishing words come to us from Amy Zucker Morgenstern. Never has it been more true than now. We extinguish this flame, but the sparks within us remain alight. From each of us, in our supposed solitude, the signals buzz and hum, sparkling through space to one another, connecting us invisibly but palpably. We are one. And from every window, our light shines.
Our benediction comes from the poetry of James L.A. Hudson. I have mercy and grace beyond my deserving. There is vision and hearing when both were gone. My spirit with gratitude both prays and sings to the love of the universe that goes on and on. Service is ended. Please join us for coffee and refreshments in the library, and have a most magnificent week.